Okay, so this is logic. Let's see, Phil 205. Not sure if this the autofocus is working quite right. So let's see if this is. Let me try to get the focus on the white screen here. Let me check one thing. It's going to be a little bit of I'm growing pains with this. I'm not getting it recorded. We'll see how that goes. Okay, logic philosophy 205. It is a sophomore level class, but it doesn't assume that you've taken philosophy before. You need not have taken philosophy before to do well in this class. It doesn't assume that you know stuff about ethics. It doesn't assume that you know stuff about metaphysics, any of the other parts of philosophy. Logic is a part of philosophy. Okay, so it's a branch of philosophy. Okay, so I mentioned a couple other branches: ethics, metaphysics. What are some other branches of philosophy?
Critical thinking.
Actually, critical thinking is part of logic.
Oh.
Okay. Logic, though, comes in two, I guess you could say, two forms. So logic itself can be informal, and it can be formal. Okay. And this class, well, critical thinking, that's philosophy 111, is informal logic. There's a little bit of formal stuff happening, and that's in terms of symbols and proofs. You do some of that in critical thinking. Actually, not all critical thinking classes, but sometimes you do. Like Venn diagrams. Some of you have done Venn diagrams. That's kind of formal logic. It's a little bit formal. Okay? A little bit structured, a little bit organized that way. Our class, 205, we will do some stuff that's found in critical thinking. We'll do some informal logic using English language, using natural language. But our real focus, what we really want to learn in this class, is formal logic. Okay? And that's going to be symbolic. So let's see, if you have the text, or at least the physical version of the text, you see the cover right here. Can you see that? No. It's kind of like there's symbols. It's another language, actually. Formal logic, you're learning another language. So that's what we're going to be doing, and that's what, at least focusing on the formal side of logic in this class. I still haven't really even talked about what logic is, but we'll get to that today. Okay, so philosophy 205 doesn't require other classes, doesn't require previous philosophy classes. So hopefully we can all kind of start on the same page here. All right, let's go through what's required in this class. Okay. I'm going to find the syllabus here. Let's see. Where did I put the syllabus? Okay, so on Canvas, there is your syllabus is right there. Everyone knows where to meet. You're here right now. Let's see. I have physical office hours as well. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 to 2. So that's basically before this class. Okay. I will set up Zoom office hours too. Not quite sure when that will be, but I will announce that. Right now, it probably looks like Friday morning, but we'll see how that goes. And maybe some overlap with physical office hours if no one shows up to it. Right, something like that. Okay, then make that Zoom as well. Because you can have a waiting room in Zoom, right? Let's see, okay, we're going to be doing formal logic. I'm not going to go through the course objectives right here. There's one required text, and you can get it in physical form or digital form. That's fine. It's this one right here. Sometimes we're going to be using it in class, so it's good to have some kind of access to it, or at least, hopefully some of you, I'll bring it to class. Sometimes I will use exercises from that book, and I'll try to put the exercises on the board or on slides. I think the book is very well written. It's generally very clear. It's not as wordy as some other logic textbooks. A lot of logic textbooks are twice as long, extremely wordy, extremely difficult to understand. Hopefully this is fine, right? I found in logic, the book alone does not really suffice. And actually, sometimes just coming to class and listening doesn't suffice either. Just like in a language class, you're just there listening, you're not going to pick up the language necessarily. You have to be doing it, okay? So, listen in class, work, practice, do the exercises, do extra exercises at home, do all the exercises you can that are in the text. The answers are online, and then check the answers once you're done. Keep practicing. Because if you just come to class and listen, if you read in a cursory manner just very quickly, you will not understand the material. Okay? You're not going to understand the material. What happens in this class generally is that if you're working, keeping up, spending time, struggling, yeah, it's going to be some struggle, you're going to do well. Not many people do like C work. It's either you do well, A or B work, or you're just totally don't get it at all. Either students pass really high, right, or they don't pass. That's often the way it is in this class. Okay? It's not the way it is in other classes. Other classes, you kind of show up, you kind of listen, and you're going to pass no problem. Like ethics. I mean, you're probably going to pass because you've already thought about ethics in your life. You kind of know stuff about ethics and the rules or like morality. Even if you're an asshole, you kind of understand ethics because that's the stuff that you're like violating. You kind of don't care or whatever. You're kind of aware of of ethics. But in this class, you haven't done some of this stuff before. This is a new language. Ethics, you're used to that language. Even if you don't buy into it, you've heard it. All right? So there's a little bit of that. The other thing that actually students do often actually appreciate is that because this is a new thing, it can be fun to do, it can be enjoyable. You're doing something, you're learning something a lot of people don't know. Or maybe they think they know, but they don't at all. And that's kind of cool. Okay? At least I think that's pretty cool. A lot of students do. They're like, I can do something the other people just have no clue about. And you'll find it is helpful too. It can be applied as well to your life in some ways, not in every way. Okay, not across the board. Okay, let's see. I'll say one more thing too about that. It's kind of like, okay, after succeeding in this class, once students succeed in this class, they kind of realize, wait, I would have been good at math if I cared, or if I really focused on it. Because it's using the same kind of thinking as you do in math. The problem in math, one problem is that you're like forced to take math since you're a young kid, like right after toddler age or something. You're like in preschool and kindergarten, you're starting to learn math. And you develop, a lot of students actually develop a kind of fear, worry about it, and they start thinking they're bad at math, and then that carries over into like thinking they can't really use the analytical side of their mind. The cool thing about logic is that some students find out, wait, I'm not bad at analytic stuff at all. I'm actually pretty awesome. But I've always thought I sucked because I sucked at math. But why did you suck at math? It may not be because you're bad at math. It just might be you have real obstacles, psychological barriers regarding math. You're told you're a C student in math from the second grade on. That sucks. That really sucks. And actually, you might not be bad at math. Okay? So logic is kind of getting at that kind of thinking in an indirect way, and in a surprising way. You might not realize what you're doing is actually pretty mathematical thinking and succeeding at it. Okay? Because math is like learning another language too. And if you don't care about that language, or if you're fearful of learning that language, you're not going to do well. So here, it's a new opportunity, okay, to learn a new language. And it's generally a universal language. When people learn logic all around the globe, they learn basically the same system. Same with math. So in that sense, it's a universal language. You take logic to any country, you can apply it, you can use it. Okay, let's see. I talk about in the notes here in the syllabus that it's important not to get behind. Let's go to the language kind of analogy again. It's like learning Spanish and you're like, you skip the colors. De colores or something, you just skip them. Well, you need them at some point, right? So in this class too, if you like skip a couple weeks, right, near the beginning, right, you're going to miss the colors or something. No, you're just going to be like, you're not going to understand later stuff. This develops, this is cumulative, this is step by step. So dedicate to doing each step. And then by the end, you're like, whoa, I'm fluent in another language. Or at least getting there. That's the plan. That's the plan in a language class. That's the plan in this class. Okay. I do mention DSPS, but in terms of like scheduling exams, but I'm kind of accommodating that in this class already. What I'm doing is not, my plan at least, unless there's like an uproar, is to not have the exams in person in class. If I did, then you would definitely have to sign up with DSPS, or if you're a DSPS student, right? And then get the extra time, getting proctored and that kind of thing. But I'm kind of building in disability accommodations by having you take the exam online. So there's going to be some stuff that's online, right? Like the homeworks, at least. I think in the homeworks I'll allow you to, pass it in maybe a paper version as well. If you're attending face-to-face, you can do that as well, or you could submit it online. Okay, but the exams, I'm thinking, just do it online that way, and then you have definitely more time to take it, and that'll accommodate any kind of extra time, or like if you need your environment, your test taking environment to be quieter or something like that, you can do that online. All right. Does that make sense like that? So, and hopefully by this point, a lot of you are used to taking an exam online anyways. Okay. And if that doesn't work, then let me know and we'll figure out some way of you taking the test in person. Okay. Let's see what else. If you're feeling extra challenged, or challenged too much, you're getting behind, let me know. Okay, I have, again, 5 classes, so I might not be aware that you're losing ground. Okay, or if you anticipate that you're not going to be in class the whole next week or something like that, then let me know so we can figure out another solution. Fortunately, I'm trying to get the recordings going here, so if you do miss a class, you can watch those later. All right, so that's one good thing about this kind of hybrid environment. Let's see what else. The best way to get hold of me, besides like in class or in office hours, is through email. In my pipeline email. If I don't respond in 24 hours or less, right, then send me a follow-up email. I don't mind being asked again, because I get so many emails that I lose track, or I might go, I'm going to respond to this, but then I forget, and it gets buried under so many emails. So remind me. I actually love being reminded. I'm not bugged by it. It makes things easier on my part instead of trying to find old emails. That can be hard. Like if I use the wrong search term, I'm like, wait, there was a question from a student a few days ago. I forgot about it. Let me search for it, and then I can't find it. I'm like, what? Did I dream that up or something? So, send me a follow-up. Let's see, grading. Your grades will be determined as follows. Let's see, homeworks, exams, and a final. So there's a number of homeworks, and I can't remember. Usually it's 7 to 8 homeworks. They don't. Each individually doesn't weigh that much. Doesn't count a huge amount, but it does add up. I definitely drop at least one of the lowest scores, maybe 2, right, depending. So you have a little bit of leeway, right? I would try to do every homework to the best of your ability, though. There's 2 exams, and then there's a final. The final is worth more than an individual exam, like a chapter exam. It really makes a difference in your grade, the final. And the reason I do it this way is so students who have been like struggling throughout the class, but still at the end they become fluent, right, as fluent as really to be expected, then you can make up a huge amount of ground at the end, because you're showing at the end, yes, I know this language, I got this down. Isn't that what really matters? If you take a Spanish class, how are you speaking at the end of the semester? So that's why I weigh the final at 30%. But I'm not weighing it at 60% because I want to give credit for those of you who worked hard throughout the semester. Okay. But homework, I want you to do the homework, so I'm definitely grading those. Because if I don't grade them, then I'm like, oh, the homework's optional, then definitely some students slack off on that. The other thing I should say about the exams versus the homework, the exams are meant to be, nothing surprising or tricky on the exams. I don't like trick questions on an exam. Basically, an exam is what you should know at this point of the semester. Homeworks, though, because I give you, I think sometimes a week to do them, I don't mind making some questions difficult, like really difficult. Okay. There might be one question out of 7 that you have to struggle with. Actually, I don't like to give homework assignments where there's a question, where there are no questions that you struggle with. You know, there has to be some struggle there to really learn this stuff. That being said, you know, on homeworks, you can be working with others. You can go to the tutor to get some kind of help on the homeworks. Okay. The tutor, Alex. So let's see, I'll just put that right here. The tutor's name is Alex Austin. He's tutored for me. Well, he was a student of mine in a few classes. He has a BA from Berkeley in philosophy and history, and he really knows his stuff. He's going to be a logic tutor. So take advantage of that. It really does help. He will contact you, he'll contact the class, probably through Canvas, like telling you his office hours, how to meet, where that's going to be done. I believe the LRC is now doing some face-to-face tutoring. I believe that's, I mean, somebody else knows, but I think that's the last word. So there's probably going to be an option like face-to-face and or Zoom. Logic, face-to-face tutoring definitely works better. It's definitely more efficient. Because he's done both. He told me just like a week ago, he's like, I hope we get to go face-to-face in tutoring logic. Much more difficult online. Okay? At least for him as a tutor, to try to handle a number of student concerns. Because student concerns differ, right? Okay, I'm going to be using plus and minus grading. I don't know why this school gives teachers an option. There should not be an option. It should be straight, right? It's like, it's either going to be no plus and minus or pluses and minuses. It should be just, that's my feeling. So I'm going the kind of the traditional way, the way most schools in this country work, plus minus system. Okay. Late homeworks and exams, I will deduct some points on late submissions. And there's a caveat there as well. You can't, because of the nature of this class where we go over the answers to homeworks and exams, there's a time limit for how late you can turn in homework or an exam. I will tell you about that, but never are you allowed to turn in a homework after we go over the answers. You can probably understand that, right? And that varies a little bit depending on when we get to the answers. But once the answers are made public, then submissions are closed. Okay? But I'm not super strict in the sense of like, there are no late, you can't turn anything late. Yeah, you can. And you can, and the exam, even sometimes I let you do a late exam as well. Okay. All right. See, I do have a reading and exam schedule, I guess. In the syllabus, there's a reading schedule. That's good to look at. It says, for example, on the first slot, it says Tuesday, August 24th. And then it says 1.1 introduction. So 1.1 means chapter 1, section 1. Okay. So the idea is that I'm going to start talking about chapter 1, section 1 on that day. So when the syllabus says, let's say Tuesday, September 7th, 3.1, that means read 3.1, look at least, maybe you don't understand it, but at least get through 3.1, and then I'll talk about it in class. So that's the way the reading schedule works. Okay. And so all the readings will come from this text. All the readings there. Any questions about what I've talked about so far in terms of the syllabus, the structure of the class, what we're going to be doing, what we're not going to be doing, that kind of thing? Yes, and your name. We might as well get names as you do it.
I'm Zoe.
Zoe, okay, great.
So since we're going to be taking the exams like at home online, are they going to be timed or are we going to have them limited time?
Okay, they are timed, but usually what I do is like give you hours.
Okay.
Hours, like all day sometimes. Yeah, I'm not, I mean, that's, yeah, I mean, once you start as an instructor, if you ever become a teacher, and then you start doing things like, I'm going to enforce an hour-and-a-half exam online, and then what if a student goes like, well, my internet dropped out for 15 minutes? I mean, it's just the equitable thing to do is give a huge chunk of time to do an exam. It's not like these exams are all super easy anyways. Yeah, so I don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I will get worried about, what I don't like, is if there's an answer that you need to give some kind of explanation or an example, like your own example, and then the example you give is word for word the example another student gives, then I'm like, okay, wait. What's the chance of that? Right? Then I get a little worried. It's like I want to make sure that you are. I mean, even if you're studying together with other people, you should come up with different examples, like that. Okay, but I deal with that on a case-by-case basis. It's usually not an issue. I'm not going to stress out about it. Okay. Usually you can tell how a student is doing through the history of the semester. Okay? If that makes sense, right? Let's see. Any other questions? There was another hand. So Zoe, you had, and what's your name?
Winston.
Winston. All right, yeah.
Yeah. When you said like we read 1.1 and then 3.1, do you want us to read everything in between?
Oh, that was just an example from
yeah,
another.
or whatever.
Oh yeah. Well, it'll on the syllabus it'll say 1.1, 1.2. Some sections are skipped.
Okay.
So we're not reading the whole book.
Okay.
So follow. You can do it if you want. Follow the reading schedule on the syllabus to know what to read and what not to read. Okay.
Yeah.
For example, in the first chapter, we're not covering 1.3. So we're skipping the third section. The third section is the kind of section you'd read if you're taking a critical thinking class. We're skipping it. Okay. Yeah. And you're going to like that because 1.3 is a beast. Yeah. Because it's dealing with natural language arguments, and that can be a lot more difficult. I'll talk more about that as we go. In some ways, formal logic is in some ways easier than informal logic. Because informal logic, you spend your time like in the whole class like interpreting ordinary language arguments, like natural language arguments. So if you're in an English-speaking institution, you're going to be looking at English arguments. If you're in a Russian-speaking institution, you'll be looking at Russian arguments. And natural language, there's lots of unclarity. It can be a real pain. If you've taken like a serious critical thinking class, it can be extremely difficult to interpret correctly natural language arguments. But once you get formal, right, it's symbolic, then, wow, there's no ambiguity. It's like it means one thing. It's more objective, it's more cut and dry in that sense. Doesn't mean it's easier overall, but it's easier in that one sense. Doesn't feel super subjective. You're not going to like necessarily clash with my interpretation. Like, you're right, you're going to know if you got it right. Whereas if you're on the informal side of things, you totally might think you're right. And no matter what I say, you're like, shut up, I'm right. But in the formal side, like when we do these proofs, you're gonna know if you got it right. You don't need me to tell you sometimes. Like, I got it. It's cool that way. Or if I correct you, you often go like, oh, that makes sense. You may or may not thank me, but at least you'll say that makes sense. Okay. Let's see. So Winston, right? Any other questions about this? And your name?
I'm Nate.
Nate. Okay.
I'm wondering if the exams will be multiple choice or not.
I never, in this class, let's see, do I ever do multiple choice? Never, even though it's online. Yeah. So it's similar in that sense to the way, I'm not even sure how math exams are done anymore, but math exams, they want you to show the work. And so I don't usually have multiple choice. I guess in a math exam they might have multiple choice and then you got to show the work anyways. But here, no, it could be short answer, it could be one word answer, it could be give a proof, give an example, but I don't use multiple choice in this class. It could be fill in the blank or something like that. I never do it that way. Curious, why are you asking? Because you like multiple choice, you don't like it?
There's a really preference for either, but I just was curious.
Yeah. I'll just add something. I will say this. In my experience, the average grade of multiple choice exams are lower than exams that are not multiple choice. I don't know if you know that. It's probably true. Constructing a multiple choice exam that is not difficult is almost impossible. The problem with multiple choice is that there's no partial credit. That's the real big issue, and that's why multiple choice exams mess students up in terms of their grades. When I give multiple choice exams online, some of you know, who've taken my online classes in other subjects besides logic. When I give a multiple choice exam, I often give you 2 chances. So that's a way of making a multiple choice exam a little less brutal. But if an instructor wants to lower the mean, right, of an exam, the grades, in an easy way, and also easy to grade, what's the solution? Multiple choice. Easy to lower the grade point average if you have multiple choice exams. It's one of those secrets that teachers don't like to tell you. You're like, every teacher told me that. No. Let's see. Okay, good. Nate. Okay. Any other questions? And your name?
Emberly?
Emberly?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So what are going to be the rules regarding exams? Will any exams be like open notes?
Well, I'm not going to enforce it. I mean, even if it's, see, that's another thing online, even if I say it's closed notes, I mean, I can't enforce it. I mean, it's not an ethics class, so do what you want. No. Let's see, open notes. Yeah, no, I don't. The thing is, like, imagine, okay, this is maybe not a happy example, but imagine I give you, like, or you take a calculus exam and someone says open notes. Is that going to help you? So it might help a tiny bit, but if you don't know how to apply the formulas and stuff, that calculus exam is going to go, you're not going to do well on it, even if you have full notes. Same thing in logic. I'm not saying logic is like calculus. Well, in some ways it is, and that is, even if I give you all the formulas and stuff you need, if you don't know how to apply them, if I just give you a whole book of notes and you don't have practice applying those notes, that it's not going to help the exam. So yeah, open notes. It'll help a little bit. It'll help a little bit because there are, there's some there are things that are really nice to have memorized and makes life easier in logic. But if you don't have to memorize them, then it's cool. Then that's fine. You don't have that extra step. But still, even if you haven't memorized, doesn't mean you're going to automatically know the answers to the questions in logic. Yeah. And sometimes the most simple sounding things can actually be the most difficult in a sense. I've been saying difficult quite a bit. For example, one thing you want to learn in this class, one of the first things you're going to learn in this class is to distinguish between arguments and non-arguments. Arguments versus non-arguments. Okay? So take a passage that's an argument and then a passage that's a non-argument. You might understand that in a just like a theoretical sense. Like you could define what an argument is. You're like, yeah, I know what it is on paper. I know how it differentiates, how it's distinct from a non-argument. But it turns out in practice, this is way more tricky than it appears. And you need practice. Pretty much everything in this class, you will need practice. Go through examples. So often what we do in this class is maybe cover a new subject or two in a class and then spend time on examples. Or cover a new concept, a new thing, new tool, new technique, do examples, and then another new tool, technique, examples. Because you have to keep those examples and practice going. If I just leave it at an abstract level and say, oh, this is what an argument is, and now I'm going to define or talk about how it's distinct from non-arguments, that's never going to be enough without practice. I don't even know if I answered your question. But I did. I started going all tangential and stuff. Cool. What was? Oh, Amberly. Amberly. Okay. With an E.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Other questions? How are we doing for time here? Let's see. Wait, that's not accurate.
Yeah, the clock's off.
What? Why did I put that in the video then? It's gonna mess everything up. Actually, the video, who cares? I can totally screw the clock. It won't matter. 3:07. So technically, yeah, technically I can go to 3:40, I guess. Let's talk about logic. Let's get this out of the way. Yeah. Go back to logic here. I'll write over what I just erased. Logic. Let's see, I have a by the way, in this class I will be using slides like PowerPoints and then the board to be able to do both. So otherwise I spend a lot of time like just writing on the board. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that you're going to see either on the whiteboard or the slides. So it might be a slide and then I do a problem set on the side or something. Okay, and we'll see how that goes. All right, I'm going to talk about logic here in, I guess, kind of a backwards fashion, an indirect fashion here. I'm going to read to you a folk tale. Let me just say that when I teach logic, I often teach it in a way that doesn't duplicate the text. Okay, so otherwise it just might as well just read the text. Okay, so the idea is that you get the input from the text, which is often not totally sufficient. You get my input, which is also not sufficient, and you add the two together. Hopefully that works. So what I'm going to do in this class, I'm going to be teaching logic in a different way sometimes than the way the book does it. All right, using different examples, sometimes the same examples, but I will often bring in other examples and other techniques and stuff. Okay, so this is one difference. I'm going to give you a folktale here. Okay, folktale, and this is from, I don't know, Eastern Europe somewhere. Who knows? No one knows really where folktales originally come from, anyways, but not specifically. But okay, so here it is. Two wise men, okay, lay sweating in the steam bath one day. Okay, so there's these two wise men. Two wise men. All right, so there's in the steam bath. To drive away the boredom of doing nothing, they began to discuss deep mathematical problems. Already, it's a little weird. Okay. Okay, so they're going to discuss these deep mathematical problems. The first one said, if, for instance, it takes 4 hours to drive to Dvinsk, all right, with one horse. So, if it takes 4 hours to drive to Dvinsk, so that's a city, with one horse. So can you imagine that? You take it going to Dvinsk in some kind of wagon or something like that with one horse. It's going to take you 4 hours. Wouldn't it be right to say that if I drove with two horses, it would only take me 2 hours? 2 hours. So that's what the first wise person is saying. If it takes me 4 hours to drive with one horse, it's going to take me 2 hours to drive with two horses. Cool? Correct as gold, answered the other sage. So that's another word for wise person. Sage. Okay? Filled with admiration. Now, why couldn't I drive to Dvinsk with 4 horses so I'd get there in 0 time? Cool. Winston.
Because you probably wouldn't get there in 2 hours if you have 2 horses.
What you're saying that the move from this to this move, you're saying it doesn't really work? You're questioning
There
it?
less time, yeah.
You're
But-
questioning it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see, Nate.
I'm thinking if you have to drag one horse, let's say you're driving a car somewhere, it takes 4 hours. If you have 2 horses, then it would take 8, right?
Wait, if you're talking about a car?
Well, I'm saying if he's driving, what is he driving?
Oh no, to drive, it's a wagon, and the horses are pulling the wagon.
The horses are pulling the wagon.
Yeah, sorry. That's the word
I
drive.
wanted to clarify that.
I could say 2 hours to get to Dvinsk.
That's cool.
To get
I
to.
wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, to arrive at, yeah. So it's not driving with 4 horses
You're
in the
not
back,
pulling a horse.
like your Subaru,
Okay.
little extra room in the back. Yeah, there was another handout. Yeah, your name?
Harrison,
Harrison.
because you can't divide it into 0. So, 4 horses would take 1 hour.
Would take 1
Because
hour?
it's cutting the time in half instead of.
Okay, so we could still make it 1 hour. Right, let's go a little correction. We can even do that. Even if we did that. But actually the original one was 0, so let's stick to 0. But what you're still doing, Harrison, is that you're definitely saying, let's keep it at the 0, because that's what the story says. What you're saying is that it may make sense if it's 1 hour, but it definitely doesn't make sense if it's 0 hours. So you're really just saying that move from here to here is bogus. That move. Is that right? You're saying going from 2 to 0 like that?
Yeah.
It's just, that doesn't work. Let's see.
Starts with a Z.
Zoe.
Zoe, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just not logical to assume that adding an extra horse would speed up both horses because the horses can only go so fast. So it's just going to alleviate some of the weight from the horse, and it's just going to like speed it up gradually, but it's never going to go all the way down to 0.
Okay, so I'm going to quote you here, Zoe. Not logical.
Yeah, like,
Right.
what if the second horse is like really stubborn and refuses to move? And
Well, okay.
And goes even slower.
Well, that's true too. I mean, so there's all these other like factors that, hey, what about the factors? What kind of horses are these? That kind of thing. Let's just say they're all like equally strong, same amount of horsepower, and same amount of good attitude. Good barley they've had. They're good eyesight. You know, they've been shot, or you know, their horse, their hooves or whatever they've had farriers come and fix their hooves and stuff. Okay, even if they're made purely equal to each other, there have been challenges to these moves. The move from here, the move from here. There was another hand up. No? Okay, so I mean, there's a number of ways you could kind of put pressure on this line of thinking. There's a kind of line of thinking. There's kind of a pattern of thinking going on here. Isn't there? There's a pattern of thinking. A pattern of thought. And there's different words in English you can use for this. There's inferences happening here. Moves from one idea to another idea. That's kind of an inference. We'll talk more about inference later, but there's a way of thinking here, an approach to thought. Yeah. Oh, by the way, the end of this folktale is, "Why trouble to go to Dvinsk at all?" exclaimed the other. "Just harness your 4 horses and stay right here." So this, I do want to just say something a little bit about this folktale. There's some humor here, obviously, and it's digging at wise men, right? So the folktale begins with calling these people wise men, but by the end of the folktale, you realize they're not wise at all. And that's an interesting, actually, truth about a lot of folktales around the world. A lot of them make fun of supposed wise people, supposed sages. Just because they call it, the word sage is used doesn't mean they are sagacious or wise. Okay? That's just an interesting tidbit about folktales. It's making fun of this move here. It's not logical. It's another word for not logical. You probably heard this word before too. Is illogical. Right? There is a problem in logic. Now I still haven't defined logic, but Zoe used it accurately. Right? It's not logical. Now, part of my point here is to say that we often realize when something is not logical, especially when it's like obviously problematic. We can point out that something is not logical, often. And we can often point out when something is logical. We're used to that kind of, we're trained in that in a sense. So you could say, what is this class doing? It's talking about logic. Are we already kind of logical? My point is that we have a kind of logical compass that we've learned somehow or built in, however we arrived at it. So I have that kind of optimism with my students, is that you have a basically functioning logical compass. However, just like a magnetic compass, it can get wonky. It can give you wrong readings. Sometimes your logical compass, your logical intuition can make mistakes. And so part of what we do in this class is to make sure you don't make mistakes. When it comes to more difficult situations, difficult passages, that you can actually not be fooled, right, by something that somebody's maybe saying is logical, but it's actually not. It's also, this is a fairly straightforward example. You can kind of like pinpoint the problems pretty darn fast. Can't make that move, can't make that move. Come on, stop it. Right, if you're at a party and some people are talking this way, you go like, whoa, how much Red Bull have you been drinking? No, whatever. No, whatever. How much vodka or something? Right away, you'd be doing something like that. But in this class, you're going to learn how to investigate, analyze, evaluate much more complicated arguments, much more complicated patterns of thinking. So that's what we're doing as well. Making that logical compass you have, it's already basically functioning, be very accurate and know when to use it, how to use it. The other thing too to keep in mind, I said know when to use it, is that some people, what they start doing when they first learn about arguments and critiquing arguments and logic, they start critiquing everything. Okay? As if everything is meant to be like a pattern of thinking, or meant to be an argument, or meant to be persuasive, or something like that. And so, in a critical thinking class, I'll talk about fallacies and how people start applying fallacies everywhere. And the point is that not everything is appropriate. It's not an appropriate target for critiquing it in terms of being a fallacy or being bad logic. Why? Because it might not be using logic. No attempt to use logic. If someone's not trying to argue, then they cannot be making a fallacy. So it's really important to know the difference between an argument and a non-argument. Sometimes when people learn about arguments, they start seeing arguments everywhere, even when they're not there. And when you start seeing arguments everywhere, you're going to start seeing fallacies. And then you're a fallacy machine. Fallacy, 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 fallacy. You know, bad logic, bad logic, bad logic. But if someone's not even trying to be logical, they're not even trying to give an argument, okay, then all those kind of critiques just are meaningless. It's kind of absurd, okay? You know, it's like, famous line, it's like blaming a dog, you know, or blaming a cat for not being a dog. You know, you're not a dog, or you don't fetch, you lame cat. Actually, that's kind of a bogus example because some cats do fetch, and they're much cooler. No, I'm kidding. Let's see, how are we doing for time? 3:23. Okay. All right. Basically functioning logical compass. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's hard to, if someone, doesn't, actually I think everyone does. It's like, it's not really analogous to the moral compass thing, I guess. I don't think. Maybe there's some analogy there. If someone doesn't have a moral compass at all, then it's hard to teach them ethics. You know. Actually, I'm not sure because they can still learn the rules and so they can still kind of study it from kind of an external point of view. Even if, maybe. So, but the analogy, it could kind of work in some way. Zoe.
Earlier in the lesson we were talking about proofs, and like proofs are generally like mathematical, and like mathematically like that does make sense.
Kind of mathematical thinking and stuff, yeah.
But like logically it doesn't make sense, so would that be considered like a proof for like this class? Is that like the format that they're going to be coming off of?
Oh, well this would be, usually when we do proofs, they are proofs to show that an argument works, is successful. So, or you could say, if you gave a proof against this, or you could say this is a bad an illogical argument, and you could give a proof why this is wrong. We're not going to really give proofs like this. Okay, this is just an example to help you understand what logic is and what logic is not. This is not meant to be an example of the kind of problem we're going to be solving in this class.
Okay.
Because this is actually probably more of the kind of word problem you'd find in math, I guess. But I should say, if you study the foundations of mathematics, like if you go further in math, at some point you go to logic. Because logic provides the foundation for mathematics. Grad students in math often are required to take classes in logic. You'd think in other countries it goes the other way. You like learn logic first and then you go to math or something, you know. But in this country it's like you learn math and also, oh, by the way, if you really want to go deep in math, you get to logic, but logic is the foundation for it. So it's kind of backwards, I guess. Kind of weird, huh? You've probably heard of set, if you've taken math, that much math, you've probably heard of set theory. I mean, that's just pure logic. That's logic. If you're in computer science, if you've taken computer science, you're doing some logic. I mean, you definitely are. There's definitely an overlap, there's crossover there. Okay. Erase this. So, logic is a specific branch of philosophy, and different ways to say. You could say that logic is the study of, I use that phrase, patterns of thinking. You could say the study of patterns of thinking. You could also say it's the study of argument. Although it might be a little broader than that. Patterns of thinking is a little broader than just argument, because argument is a certain kind of pattern of thinking. But logic often just focuses on argument. Another more, I guess, broad way of talking about logic is to say the study of reasoning. Okay? I guess you could say the systematic study of patterns of thinking, or you could say of argument, of reasoning. And that's all that logic is. What we're going to do in this class is, and this is all true of the class, but the language, the terminology we're going to use is really, at least to begin with, is really focused on argument. So think of logic as the study of argument. I mean, it's consistent with all these other things, but I really want to focus on this argument. So, argument, what we're going to do, if we're going to study argument, we need to define it. By the way, I'm using a little bit of, I don't know, abbreviations here, kind of symbolic here. Equal sign and then DF, that means is defined as. So, argument is defined as. Can anybody define argument maybe without looking at the text, without looking online? Define what an argument is. Okay, Harrison.
To make an inference based on observations and
To make an inference based on observations.
And reasoning.
And what?
And reasoning.
And reasoning. Okay. All right. So make an inference based on observation and reasoning. Okay, I'm just gonna listen to them right now. Yes, and your name?
Bailey?
Bailey. Okay. What's your example? I mean, how would you define argument?
Maybe like exchanging different ideas and different perspectives with someone.
Exchanging different ideas and different perspectives with someone. Let me talk about that for a second before I forget it. That might, like sounds like an exchange of ideas. That may or may not involve an argument. You could be just giving ideas, and there's no backing up of any of your ideas. It's when you support an idea, when you back up an idea. Another word for that, as Harrison was saying, is make an inference, but that's a technical term too. So if you said make an inference, I would say, like, what do you mean by inference?
Yeah.
The idea is this, that in an argument, all right, you're making an inference, but what is that? That is, you're stating a claim or an idea, you're making a claim, like uttering an idea, and you're trying to support it with other ideas. That's when you start making an argument. Okay? Like if I say, masks are helpful during COVID. If I just say that, that's not an argument. Okay. Not in the way we define argument. Even if someone says like, well, I think they are not helpful. It's not even an exchange of ideas, right? Like a disagreement. But our definition of argument, that there's no argument there at all. There's a disagreement. And sometimes in English you might say they're arguing, but in a sense they're not, because neither one is backing up their view. They're just somebody's stating their position, another person stating their position, and they're not backing up their positions. So there's no argument. There's no argument happening at all. Okay? Let's see, Zoe had a hand up, then Nate. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like it would either be like a contradiction or support of like a previous notion and like with like other evidence.
Support of a previous notion or contradiction. What do you mean by that?
Because like you can contradict someone and it can be an argument as long as you like provide support to that, or you can also argue a support of something else.
Okay. Yeah, when you're arguing, you're trying to support a position, but that position could be, I guess you could say, affirmative, like in favor of a view. It could also be to contradict someone else's view, right? But it's still supporting a position. The position could be positive or affirmative, or it could be negative. It could be kind of denial. But you have to be providing some reason to believe that view. It doesn't have to rely on observation. So Harrison mentioned observation. Argument doesn't necessarily need observation, like senses or something. It can be a purely logical argument. For example, if somebody says, Sally was born in Santa Barbara, therefore she was born in California. That move, that inference from one idea to another idea, okay? There's an argument happening right there, but it's not based on a sense observation. At least not, that one's not directly. Actually, that one gets a little bit tricky, because you might say, how do you know Santa Barbara's in California? It's based on observation. So let's do another one. Let's see. Sally is unmarried, therefore she's a bachelorette. Now, to know if she's married or not, that's probably based on observation. But the logical move is not based on observation. That reasoning is based on definition of what it means to be unmarried or being a bachelor or that kind of thing. Let's see. Oh, Nate, you had your hand up earlier.
So basically, what you're telling us is that simply saying masks are good for stopping the spread of COVID is not an argument, but an argument would be masks are good because they protect us from others.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because now because they protect us from others, and they protect us from others would be a reason. Now, technically, it's called a premise. We'll talk about that next time, in support of that claim that it's good, right? So, yeah, now you have a little argument going on. You have your hand up?
I was just going to say that you're drawing like a conclusion based on the premise that masks are reducing the risk.
So what's your name?
Joaquin.
Joaquin. Yeah, Joaquin, use the language totally accurately, a conclusion premise. You notice that I try to define argument without using their technical terms. And in philosophy, I call them, they're technical, they are terms of art in the discipline of philosophy. There's a special way of defining them. We're going to get to that next class. Right now I'm trying to try to help you understand what an argument is without using technical terms like conclusion and premise, because we're going to use them. Emberly, you had your hand up.
Would you say is an argument like trying to establish something as a fact based on other known things?
Yeah, I mean, you could put it that way. You're trying to establish that something is a fact based on other claims about facts. The reason I don't define it that way is that people don't in English language don't use the word fact similarly. For example, people make distinctions between like facts and opinions, stuff like that. In philosophy, we don't talk about facts and opinions the same way that a lot of people learn about those things. For example, I think a lot of you learn, I don't know, what have you learned about opinions? What have you learned about opinions? Like, what's an opinion? You probably learned, you've learned the difference between facts and opinions or something, Nate.
Sort of. I feel like there's always a degree of subjectivity involved in opinions. It can stem from like an idea that was considered logical, but then they provide their own interpretation of it.
Okay, yeah, you had your hand up, yeah.
I was going to say personal idea you build over time.
Your personal idea you build over time. Yeah, but what if it's a personal idea I built over time, and then I'm finally accepted, I built it over time, I'm like, yeah, I can buy that 2 + 2 = 4. Took me a while. My teachers, I don't trust teachers. When I added up 2 apples with 2 apples, I didn't really trust my eyesight and stuff. So I wasn't sure that 2 + 2 = 4, but now I am. So in philosophy, we would call that your opinion. It's a belief that you have, and you stand by it. It's your opinion. But it's still right. It's still factual. So some opinions are factual. But we don't. So that's why I don't use the terms fact. I don't use facts and opinions in this class, because you've probably learned something radically different. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you might learn the difference between like facts and values. That facts are real, and that values are not, or something like that. In philosophy, no values can be just as real as facts. Maybe more so. Let me give you an example. Here's a value. It's wrong to torture a cat for fun. That's a value statement. I think it's true. Okay? That is just as stable, probably. It's probably just as true, obviously true, as saying that there are cats in Australia right now. Think about it. They're probably both true. They're probably both true. But one's a value statement, one's a fact. By the way, you don't even know that there are cats in Australia right now, do you? If we're going to be technical about this, you have 100% certainty. I have 100% certainty that torturing a cat for fun is wrong. I can argue for that. 100% certainty. More. I'll just say this, maybe 98. But my confidence that there are cats in Australia is maybe a little bit lower. Just a tad. I don't know what happened last night. No, you know what I'm saying? So the fact-value distinction thing just because facts and values are different kinds of statements, and they are, doesn't mean that like values are somehow like purely subjective, or like they're not true, right? They're purely personal, stuff like that. No, because I could say even if there are no humans in existence, it's still wrong to torture a cat for fun. So yeah, it's a value statement, but you can still say it's true. So see why I don't use facts, I don't use opinion. And if I do use opinion, I usually just mean that's a belief of yours. It's a belief. Opinion. And actually that's, if you look at it etymologically, at the root of it, to opine, opinion, that goes down to it's a belief of yours. And aren't some of your beliefs true? Hopefully. Joaquin.
I was just gonna ask if opinions are beliefs, or like beliefs are opinions. Like if I believe in mermaids, that's purely an opinion because I can't.
Well, see, when you say purely an opinion, see, already right there, you're saying it's like false or something. I know what you're doing with that, and it kind of makes sense. I'm not saying don't say it that way. I'm just saying in philosophy, an opinion can be true.
Yeah.
An opinion can
I
be
don't
true.
like have any way to prove it. Like.
Well, that might be true.
Yeah.
I have an opinion in philosophy. I could say I have an opinion that COVID is real. That works in philosophy the way opinion is used. Okay, and then you would say, and it's also factual. It's also true. The only time we'd say like a claim is like purely subjective and it can't be true or false would be something like chocolate ice cream tastes the best. That's purely personal preference kind of thing. That would not be a statement about the way the world is. That would not even be a candidate for being a fact. Whereas lots of opinions are candidates for being factual. Right? Doesn't mean they are factual, but they're candidates for being factual. They could be. Okay? I don't want to spend too much time on that. And actually, in this class, in the book, kind of avoids that whole language because we're so used to using opinion in one way, and then you come to philosophy, it's like, what? Or fact in that way. Okay? Zoe.
Yeah. Hey, so should we always be using the term opinion, pretty much?
Just say things like, if someone makes a claim, say, they're making a claim, they're making a statement, they're asserting an idea, they're making a belief. You can say opinion if you want to. It's not going to bother me.
But would it be correct to always use opinion? I mean, but I'm not saying one is more correct than the
No,
other.
outside of the class, if you say that person's making a claim, they're asserting a statement, then other people will understand you. But if you start using opinion in the way that the way you kind of do it in philosophy, since it's more of it's understood in a different sense. It doesn't work outside the classroom sometimes, or outside of academia. But there's a lot of words like that. In philosophy, validity has a special term. Has a special meaning. And if you start using it in the philosophical way outside of the discipline of philosophy, and you think people understand you, they're not. And actually, a lot of disciplines use the term validity, but they mean different things by it. And that's just one example. There's lots of pieces of language that are specific to disciplines. And that's something you learn in this class is you're kind of learning not only logic, but you're also learning the language of philosophy a little bit too. Like when I hear somebody say validity, the first thing I think of is like, how are they defining it? Because there's a number of ways to define validity. So that's something to keep in mind. How are we doing for time? I think we're way out of time. What? Should have stopped me, I guess. Okay, we're done. Let's see. I will see you on Thursday. I'll try to stop at 3:40. You had a question. I'm going to stop the recording here.